Yeah. So I'm the senior pastor of the Congregational Church of Exeter, which is on Front Street, and I've been here about 2 years. I came to Exeter then when they were looking for a new pastor, and fell in love with the town and fell in love with the church. And Dan asked me to come tonight for this book launch. This is my first book. It's called Glorify, Reclaiming the Heart of Progressive Christianity. A lot of the book is the stories about what it is to be a pastor, and to be a pastor who's under 40 and sort of Gen X and engaged in activism, and also engaged in being a very traditional church pastor and loving people where they are, and helping a congregation to find its center and to grow. The book is about what faith means in the 21st century and what it means to be an open-minded Christian who's affirming of all people and who's concerned about the world and how we live in it. And to also be clear about what we believe and how we can help the church to cling on to that foundation at the same time. So it's really them wherever they are in their journey, and that they're called to a life that's full of abundance, and really where their purpose is not any small thing, but instead to be part of this great, glorious world and to be part of God's plan in it.
Good evening. My name is Dan Chartrand. I'm the owner of Water Street Bookstore. The mission of Water Street Bookstore is to build community around the written word, and I'd say we're on mission tonight. So thank you, Reverend Emily. Appreciate you all being here. I know you have a lot of things that demand your time, and when you come out to the bookstore to see an author, local or national, we really appreciate that you take the time to do this. So thank you so much for all of you for being here tonight and creating this community. Reverend Emily has been here a short time in Exeter in the grand scheme of Exeter. I've been here a short time in Exeter. But I can't think of another person who has come into this community, and admittedly you assumed a very important role, but who has made such a difference in such a short time. I'm not going to talk about what the book is about because that's Reverend Emily's job, but I read a little bit of this book this afternoon. It just came in from Pilgrim Press yesterday. Our amazing store manager and events coordinator, Stephanie Schmidt, pried them out of the warehouse. She's so good that she got them here before the author received. That's how good Stephanie is. I will apologize to you. We are running short tonight, but we have another shipment coming in early next week. And just let us know if you'd like us to set one aside for you and how you'd like it inscribed. Emily has agreed to do that early next week as soon as the books arrive, to make time in her schedule. So here's what Emily has taught me in the short time she's been here. I was raised deep in the Catholic community of St. Paul, Minnesota. Left Catholicism my late 20s, early 30s. Spent some time at the UU Church here in Exeter, and I'm still a member there. But I've always the idea of Jesus has always been important to me, going back to my time being raised deep in what I call the Catholic ghetto of St. Paul, Minnesota. And it took me a long time to kind of make my peace with the man. But I think for me, I think I'm partway there. I've decided that the tomb of Jesus and my heart are both a symbol of and symbolized by. Those two things are almost a perfect tautology. And like Jesus, rolling the rock away from the tomb and resurrecting, my job is to roll the rock away from my heart in every moment. And what I read of Emily's book this afternoon, I think I have a lot more to learn about that particular thing from Reverend Emily. So I'm going to get out of the way and let her talk to us about that. And I so appreciate you all being here. Please join me in welcoming Emily Heath.
So I thank you all so much for coming, and the first thing I want to do is thank Water Street, thank Dan in particular, and Steph, and everyone here who has been so welcoming over the past 2 years that I've lived here. So my first job in high school was at a bookstore, and it was at an independent bookstore in Winter Park, Florida, on Park Avenue, which is like the Water Street of Winter Park. And it was just this incredible experience, and I remember wandering through the store and my senior year of high school and picking up this book called A Prayer for Owen Meany. And it's I think the book that made me a religion major in college and also an English major in college. And when I was called to Exeter, I completely forgot that the town it's based on is Exeter, New Hampshire. But I do remember that when I was looking at the profile for the church, they kept talking about this independent bookstore in town. And I thought any town that can sustain an independent bookstore and love an independent bookstore, that was the kind of town I wanted to live in. Because that is such this is a cornerstone of the community, and that says a lot about Exeter. So thank you to Dan, and thank you to this great bookstore. So I've obviously never done this before. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about why I write and why I wrote this book, and then read a selection of the book, open it up to questions, and then I'm glad to sign your copy if you have one. And like Dan said, if you weren't able to get one today, I'm glad to, if you buy one and you say how you would like it inscribed, I'll come by and inscribe it for you. Or bring it to me and I'll inscribe it directly if you live in town. So I started writing, I always wanted to write. And I started writing for myself years ago, but putting it out there in the world was a step I didn't take for years and years. And I started writing about 5.5 years ago, publicly. And I did a lot of writing at first for the Huffington Post, for the religion section, and blogging on my own blog. I really came of this from a digital perspective. And then the United Church of Christ asked me to write their daily devotionals. And so I started doing that a couple of times a month. And I wrote a blog post. I was starting to kind of get more of a following through the blogs, and I wrote a blog post that hit a nerve with people, both positive and negative. And I talked to Pilgrim Press. Pilgrim Press is the United Church of Christ publishing house. It's also the oldest publisher in the United States, because it's from the, as soon as the Pilgrims and the Puritans got here, they started putting out books. That's what became Pilgrim Press. And the editor there, who edited the daily devotionals, said, maybe you should write a book, and maybe you should write about this topic. And so that's how this book came to be. And about a year ago, we agreed that I would write it, and I wrote it and submitted it in the fall. And as most of you know, I'm the pastor at the Congregational Church up here, so it was a lot of waking up at 5 a.m. and writing before work. And Heidi threatened to divorce me if I kept waking up at 5 a.m. to write. But we got through that, and I submitted it, and people have been so supportive, and it literally just came off the press last week, and the first copies came here because Steph told the press, I really need them. and she walked it, she parted the waters and got them here. So I'm going to read an excerpt and then ask questions. And what I'll say first is I grew up not religious at all. My family wasn't anti-religious by any means, but we didn't go to church. We might go on Christmas and Easter, but my parents kind of wasn't really their thing. Right now, what I grew up would be called a nun, N-O-N-E, a person that grew up with no religious affiliation. It's actually the largest growing religious group in this country, people who grow up without a religious affiliation. And I came to faith late in my teens and through college, and ended up in seminary that way. So I joke that like my form of rebellion as a teenager was, deciding to join the church. And the thing I did that made my parents like the most surprised was when I didn't go in the family business, which was everyone worked for the government, and instead I went to seminary. So I've always had a good experience in the church. I was really lucky to have really great mentors in college. And now that I'm a pastor, I'm really passionate about having a church community that is loving and accepting of everyone, because that's what I found. But also having a church community that's more than a clubhouse or a country club, one where we go deeper. And so I wrote Glorify about reclaiming the heart of progressive Christianity, which is taking the affirming ideas of churches like the United Church of Christ, but also remembering that we're not a club, we're there for something more, and we need to go deeper. So I'm going to read an excerpt that kind of talks about what it's like to be someone that's working for social justice, but wanting to root that in something else. So this is from chapter 9 of the book. Chapter 9 is called Witnesses to the Resurrection. State House hallways. In June of 2011, my future wife and I spent a week in the halls of the New York State Capitol building, along with a crowd of other marriage equality supporters. Before state bans against same-sex marriage started tumbling, before the Defense of Marriage Act was overturned, and before the Supreme Court declared that marriage equality was the law of the land, there was a fight for equality in New York State. New York's anti-gay marriage laws were the linchpin in the struggle, the big domino whose fall would signal that victory nationwide was in sight. My wife is a native upstate New Yorker, which made this extra personal to her. So day after day we drove from our home, then in southern Vermont, to Albany, where we joined the chorus of witnesses asking for marriage equality to come to New York. The first day, when I showed up in my clergy collar, the anti-gay marriage crowd saw me and smiled. They assumed I was one of them. But when Heidi and I stood next to a group of radical activists wearing pink tape over their mouths to signify the silencing of same-sex couples, more than a few eyebrows were raised. The halls of the building were filled to capacity with protesters on both sides. Each day for the next week, we endured what can only be described as verbal abuse from anti-equality Christians. Truly, not all of those opposing marriage equality were mean-spirited. Some were nice enough and went so far as to offer us water and snacks. Too many others, though, were just plain unkind. And too few of the good Christians who stood nearby did anything to rein them in. The most harrowing moment for me came when a prominent ex-gay activist pointed at my clergy collar and yelled, quote, "You're not fooling anyone with that thing." He yelled that I was not a real pastor, and that I had simply bought a clergy shirt to deceive others. When I replied that I was an ordained minister, he looked incredulous and told me to read the Bible. I told him that I'd read it cover to cover, in English, the original Hebrew, and the Greek. Fuming, he told me I was going to hell. Before I could respond, Heidi grabbed my shoulder and guided me away. The incident left me shaken. Not so much for me, but for Christians everywhere. Too often Christians have ceded the public proclamation of Christian values to fundamentalists. If you ask the youth and young adults who were with us in that hallway that week what Christians thought of them, they would likely have believed that the vast majority, if not all Christians, hated them. That was true, even with Heidi, myself, and a number of other supportive clergy visible and engaged. This is probably not at all that surprising to you if you are a progressive Christian. If you're anything like me, you roll your eyes in frustration every time a right-wing extremist clergy person claims to offer the, quote, Christian perspective on an issue. Or like me, you may wonder how the freedom to bully and abuse LGBTQ youth ever became a religious issue dear to the hearts of Christ's followers. The public hijacking of the name Christian by those who would use the government and other means to limit the rights of others is a threat not only to our democracy, but also to our faith. The simple fact is that too often the word Christian is understood in our culture to be synonymous with unkind, judgmental, or exclusionary. The most distressing part is that though progressive Christians are a smaller group than more conservative or fundamentalist Christians, we have not ceded our place in the public arena surely because we are outnumbered. It is my belief that a big part of the reason so few people know that there are Christians out there who would affirm them is because we don't know who we are and for what we stand. Most of us would be hard-pressed to make an elevator speech about why we believe what we believe and what that means for how we interact with the world. We prefer instead to say what we are not. But the problem with defining ourselves mostly in negatives is that it leaves us little ground on which to stand. In an age of rootlessness, when people are looking for meaning, that's just not enough. Not only will we not thrive, but progressive Christianity might not even survive. Of course, we have another choice. Up until this point, we have looked at ways to become disciples, people who are formed and transformed by our relationship with Christ, our teacher. Now we are continuing our turn to the next stage of faith, becoming witnesses to God's love, and using that witness to transform the world. That's from chapter 9. So I was thought about reading another part, but I think I'm just going to open it up for questions, and then we've been deciding. So are there any questions or wonderings you have that I could answer, or thoughts that you have that you want to share? Yeah.
Did you manage to get a copy?
Did I manage it? This is the first time I've gotten my hands on it. My author copies haven't even come. They're on a UPS truck somewhere. So I don't know what magic Steph worked, but she did a good job.
Are there plenty of copies?
There are,
We have some left, yeah.
There are 5 more left on the pantry.
yeah, and our, back here, are they gone? They're gone, okay. So there are a few more here, yeah.
Emily, how did you arrive at the title?
So I went back and forth with titles. In fact, when I signed the contract, it had a completely different title. I think the working title was This Little Light of Ours, which was from the song This Little Light of Mine. But what I talk about is something from the tradition I come from originally, which is the Presbyterian Church, where we talk about what's the purpose of humankind. And the answer is to glorify God and enjoy God forever. And I like this idea of glorifying, of it being not about us, but about God. And so I think it's the second chapter, I talk a lot about that and why this is the title. So it's, I didn't want it to be about this is how you save your church, this is how you make your church bigger, this is how, I wanted it to be about, this is about God and our relationship with God. Other thoughts?
I'm just curious, what was the outcome in New York State? I can't remember.
In New York State, marriage equality passed, and it was interesting all week. It had been Heidi was there, and it had been everything was at the boiling point.
It was a nail-biter.
Yeah.
It really was.
And people were literally in these State House hallways, and I really thought like something horrible was going to happen. There was going to be a fist fight or something. And by the time the vote came around, the people who realized they weren't going to win cleared out. But it was a week of real spiritual violence in a real way. I don't think I've been told I'm going to hell that many times. I mean, I grew up in the South, and I don't think I've been told I was going to hell that many times. But when the moment where it happened, it was this incredible sense that the tide had shifted. I know for Heidi and I, and we're in our 30s, we grew up never thinking that we would be able to, A, come out, B, live openly, C, get married and have our marriage recognized. And, you know, I think that the vote in New York is what changed this country. It was the first major state, population-wise, to make this change. And there was a sense that night that life was going to be different. So, yeah.
I'm sure you could recount all hundreds of negative examples.
Yeah.
I would be interested if you were to remember any instances of people who in a very positive way have essentially changed within their minds and hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Have you encountered such people, and if so, could you describe a few cases?
Yeah. I mean, I came out in 1994 and in the South, and there wasn't a lot of support. But I think about the people I went to seminary with, who were really split. My seminary class was very split, and who came to see the love that people had for each other, and really prayed and really discerned. And I saw their hearts change in a real way. And I can say now, every church I've served, you know, there's been at least one or two people that haven't been sure when I've gotten there.
Did they share anything in common that was just crucial in making that change?
Yeah, I think the crucial thing was they opened their hearts up enough, and they prayed about it. Like, I honestly think a spiritual openness is what did it. There's this comic, this old Snoopy comic, where Snoopy's like, I'm going to write a book on theology, and someone asks what's it going to be called, and he says, has it ever occurred to you you might be wrong? You know, and I think that's the truth of theology. Like, if I can say anything with certainty and say, nope, and that's absolutely it, you know, I've closed off what God might be doing next. And so for everyone I've talked to who's changed their mind, it's been a real openness to be open to what God is doing next. It's a real spiritual maturity, in a way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm a nun.
Yeah. Like an N-O-N-E.
Yeah, like
No.
yeah. Opposite, I guess. Yeah. And, I just actually, about 2 weeks ago, I joined Unitarian Universalist Church in Arlington, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And so it's the first time, I'm about to turn 40.
Yeah.
Soon. It's the first time I've ever been part of any church in
Right.
my whole life. And my question for you is, I'm wondering, because I'm humorously ignorant about religion.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm fascinated by religion.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering for you, what were your early resources that you used
Yeah.
to kind of learn and find your own inspiration in your own path?
Yeah.
Were they all Christian? What spoke to you early on that started you off?
Yeah. Well, I talk a little bit about it in the book why at 17 I joined the church, and it was for completely the wrong reasons. It was I was in a history class, and the history teacher made us all say what church we went to so he could show how the European Reformation had affected the United States, and I was the only one who didn't have an answer. And I was like this was the South, right? So I was really embarrassed. And I was like, I felt so ignorant in that moment. I wanted to have an answer when I went to college the next fall. And so I was baptized before I went off to college. But I knew very little. And I became a religion major, which is a really handy way if you want to, like, you know. And like, I knew the church was where I wanted to be, but I was really fortunate at my college. Like, my college had 25% of the student body was Jewish. And so we had rabbis as professors, like I went to Seders, you know. And then we had partnerships with Buddhist communities. And so I went to Zen meditation, you know. And
You did?
I did. Heidi knows I'm like the least meditative like person. Yeah. Like I'm not saying I went a whole lot, but you know. But for me, it was just exposing myself, you know. And the thing is, I think a lot of religious communities, no matter what they are, they expect that now, you know, the new normal is not being raised with religion. And so they're open to seekers and people who just have questions. But I also know what it was like to go into the church when that was not normal. And like everyone started saying the Lord's Prayer, and I was like, how do all these people know the words? You know, I had no clue. And I remember like going home and trying to memorize it, you know. And so that's something for every faith community to be aware of, is that the people who come in and sit in your pews might not have any idea, like the things you assume that everyone knows, you know, it's different. It's different. So for me, it was just a lot of like opening myself up to more experiences, finding people I respected, and being like, can I have coffee with you? And talking to them, and that's how I found people who are my mentors. So, and a lot of reading, you know, reading broadly, reading, not being afraid to investigate anything. And for me, I was baptized in the Episcopal Church, and that was not, I realized pretty quickly where I was going to be long term. So not saying like I have to stay here, you know, like being open to where God was taking me after that. So, yeah. Does that help? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
So, you know, what I'm hearing, and I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of background on the book yet.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing is that you were drawn in a certain direction, and you know what you explored and then got to believe what you believe in.
Yeah.
Did this journey also show to you what you didn't want to believe in?
It did. You know, I grew up, I've said this like 3 times now, in the South. So I had examples all around me of what I didn't want to believe in. The largest ex-gay ministry in the country was headquartered out of the town I grew up in.
Oh, good time.
Yeah, yeah. And so it was like I had friends who came out and their parents kicked them out, you know, and I thought, wow, these are good Christians, and they're literally kicking their teenage kids, you know, out. You know, so I knew that's not what I wanted to be. In fact, like sometimes I'm very surprised I ended up Christian, because that was the kind of Christianity I saw around me. So I knew where I didn't want to end up on the Christian side. One of my best friends from college went on to be a rabbi, and you know, I used to go to Shabbat services with her, and I found that really an affirming, attractive community. And yet at the end of the day, it was the story of Jesus Christ that pulled me back. And so I could say that's not who I am, but I really respected it. And I felt God in Shabbat services in profound ways. So it was like just the kind of self-differentiation work that we all do, where we figure out who we are and what we're not, and what faith we kind of fall in love with, you know. So there wasn't a lot of rejecting, except for that stuff I grew up around, but more just, that's not who I am, but I can appreciate it.
Yeah, the South is an interesting place. My wife also spent some time there as a youngster, and I'm kind of surprised she survived it sometime.
Yeah.
But it's super interesting because I am also a nun,
and
was drawn very late to the church, more for the community than anything.
Yeah.
And I know what I believe, and it might not be the same thing that everybody else believes, but that's okay with me, because I'm just very progressive and very open. And it's amazing how different it can be. You know, kids whose family turned them away because they came out. We have 6 kids, and we're like, somebody be gay!
Yeah.
Come on! Trans? Anybody?
Yeah.
They think we're crazy, you know?
Yeah. You know, and the one thing I can say, when I was 18 and I came out as gay in the South, some of the first people I told were clergy people. And they were the most wonderful, open, affirming people, you know. I told my college chaplain, his name was Sammy, and he literally talked like Forrest Gump, like he had like this real like southern thick accent, and he was a United Methodist from Macon, Georgia, and I'd only known him a couple months, and I thought this guy is going to tell me I can't be a Christian, you know, but I had to talk to someone, a minister, and the first thing he said when I was done was, "I affirm you, and God loves you," and I think like because I walked into his office. And not the office of someone else. What a different trajectory my whole life went on. If I had walked into another church, you know, and I think of friends who rejected the church and went through difficult times, and friends who died of AIDS after, you know, falling into substance abuse and risky behaviors and, you know, feeling unloved, and then at the end of their life never felt like they could come back to the church. And I think, you know, it was a profound gift of grace that I walked through the right door. And I could have just so easily walked through the wrong one, and my life could have been so different. So, yeah. So now I look at the kids at my church and I think, whatever they're dealing with when they walk through my door, you know, the last thing I want them to know is God loves them. Yeah. And I think the kids at our church know that. A lot of you go to our church, you know. But that's what I tell our Sunday school teachers. If at the end of this hour all they know is God loves them, you've succeeded. You know. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts or? All right.
Emily, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you all.